friends, welcome back to my channel. My name's Katie, this is Life Between Words. I thought that because this past Friday the movie Wonder came out, I would talk about some of my very favorite middle grade books, which of course includes Wonder. The twist is that I'm only going to talk about middle grade books that I read as an adult. None of these middle grade books are middle grade books that I read when I was a kid. They're all books that I read in my career as an adult and still loved. They still all hold a special place in my heart. I think they're wonderful. In the past couple years, I have not been reading very much middle grade, but historically, even as an adult, I love middle grade books. And I'll tell you a little bit about why I love middle grade books so much. One of the things that I find as an adult reader reading adult books is that the themes that are explored are really interesting, but often we are left without hope. If it's done well, middle grade books explore the same deep human themes that adult books do, except they do it in a way that is hopeful. They do it in a way that doesn't leave you so depressed that you feel like the world is a terrible place. I love good children's literature. I qualify that because there is some really bad children's literature. C.S. Lewis has a couple really great quotes about children's literature, which makes sense because he wrote a very famous series for children, The Chronicles of Narnia, of course. He had some very poignant thoughts about reading children's literature as adults. These are a couple of the quotes that I really love that he said. He said, "A children's story that can only be enjoyed by children is not a good children's story in the slightest." He also said, and I'm going to have to look down for this one because it's a little more complicated, "No book is really worth reading at the age of 10, which is not equally and often far more worth reading at the age of 50 and beyond." Children's books can and often do explore the same deep themes we find in adult literature that often weaves in deep truths of hopefulness alongside those darker themes that we find. It often weaves in beauty alongside those kind of harder, uglier sides of humanity. And that tension is often a lot more true than just the really bad, awful, ugly things. I don't know. I guess this is just a personal thing. I don't like my books to leave me feeling hopeless and depressed. And for a long time, I avoided reading a lot of adult literature because I felt like every book I was reading was so depressing. Of course, you can find those same human themes, that same tension between the ugliness of humanity and the beauty of humanity in adult books. But I feel like if it's a good children's literature book, then they do it in a way that is so winsome and wonderful and beautiful. That's all a very long introduction to talk to you about some of my favorite children's literature books that I've read as an adult. Because this video was inspired by Wonder, I will just start by talking about Wonder. This is by R.J. Palacio. I just scooted over a little bit, sorry, so you could probably tell that there was a shift there. Wonder tells the story of a little boy named Augie Pullman who was born with a condition called mandibulofacial dysostosis. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, I could be wrong. Basically, the bone structure in his face didn't develop properly, and so he looks different than other people. At the opening of this book, we meet Augie, who is clearly a really, really special little boy. And he's going to be starting 5th grade at a mainstream school. Before this point, his parents have homeschooled him. So, the book is about him adjusting to the school life. It's about him making friends. It's about how he copes at the hands of bullies. And really, what it's about at its core is loving and accepting people for who they are on the inside. This book is so beautiful, partly because the message that it shares is so true and so beautiful, and partly because the character of Augie is so tremendously magnetic. He is such a wonderful character, and you cannot help but fall in love with him and his family. My memory is that it's told from a few different perspectives. You get his perspective, I think you get his sister's perspective, and you might get the bully's perspective. I could be wrong about that, but my memory is that you get a couple different perspectives. It's been quite some time since I've read this book. I really want to reread it, especially now that the movie is out. I highly recommend that you go and pick up Wonder if you haven't already. It is just as magnificent as everyone says that it is, and it is meant for all ages. Several of these books that I'm going to mention have authors that I'm deeply attached to, and I know that I've talked about before. One of those authors is Kate DiCamillo. I just chose The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane because I feel like her most famous book, which was The Tale of Despereaux, gets the most love. But I think that The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane is my favorite. One of the things that I love about Kate DiCamillo is that she writes for young kids without pandering to them. I wish I knew how to flesh that out other than to give an example, which is that often you'll find big words in her books that little kids aren't going to know. They're going to have to look them up, or they're going to have to ask an adult, but she encourages kids to do that. The other thing I love about Kate DiCamillo is that her books always have the most beautiful illustrations. I mean, any one of these would probably work. I don't know why it's taking me so long to choose one. So like, here's an example of a little boy carrying a bunny down the road. It's just really beautiful. This book, and I'm pretty sure I've talked about this book at least once on my channel before, it's about a little China bunny who's owned by a little girl who loves him so dearly and loves him so well. But his name is Edward. Edward is very vain, and one day he is lost over the side of a ship. He ends up being owned by a whole bunch of different people, and over the course of time, he learns about what it means to really be beautiful. Once again, similarly to Wonder, it's about the fact that it's much more important to be beautiful on the inside than it is to be beautiful on the outside. I just think this book is such a treasure. I love it so much. We are losing light fast, so I'm going to try and hurry here. The next book I have to talk about is called Savvy by Ingrid Law. This is, I guess, maybe fantasy, but you could possibly also classify it as magical realism because it takes place in our world. It's just part of life, this magic. That kind of makes it sound a little bit more like magical realism, but anyway, it could possibly be classified in either one. I don't really know. This is about a family called the Beaumonts. The main character, Mississippi Beaumont, they call her Mibs. In this family, when you turn 13, you get a magical gift, a magical power. They call it a savvy. And when Mibs turns 13, on the day she turns 13, her father is in a terrible accident. And so she goes on an adventure to try and save him. And the whole time she's really, really, really hoping that the savvy that she gets is going to save his life. And it's all about family, not only the family that we're born into, but the family that we surround ourselves with. It's about friendship, and it's also a road trip novel. I love road trip novels. So she goes on an adventure in this bus here, and it's all about the people that she meets along the way. It's just really whimsical and magical, and I loved reading this book. I think I may have even read it twice in my life already because I just enjoyed reading this so much. It won the Newbery Honor, and also it won a bunch of other awards. Anyway, it's wonderful. There's some other books in the series. I've read one of the others called Scumble. I didn't like it as much, but it wasn't terrible. I just think that this first one is the best. I don't know if the camera cut me off before I finished talking about this, but this book is about the Penderwick sisters who go to live on an estate during their summer vacation with their father, who I think has a summer job there. The estate is called Arundel, and a little boy named Jeffrey lives at Arundel. Jeffrey and the Penderwick sisters end up befriending each other, and Jeffrey's mother does not really like this very much. So it's kind of all about their adventures over the course of the summer. It's a book full of heart, full of friendship, full of sisterly family love. You love all of the characters, and you love the adventures that they go on. Like I said, it feels like a classic. It's beautiful. And there are other books in the series that I have never read. I had a couple people the last time I mentioned this say that I should continue on in the series, but if any of you have read the Penderwicks and have read on in the series, please tell me, should I keep going? Should this become a priority for me? Because I loved the first book so much, but I just never picked up the rest. Finally, another one of my very, very favorite middle grade authors, he has done no wrong in my mind, is Gary Schmidt. The most recent book that I read by him was called Orbiting Jupiter, which was actually a YA book. I don't think that that one was middle grade, but my favorite are his middle grade books. I liked Orbiting Jupiter, it was very good, but I think my all-time favorite is either between OK for Now and The Wednesday Wars. These are sort of companion novels. The Wednesday Wars came out first, takes place during the 60s, during the Vietnam War. It's about a 7th grader named Halling Hood who ends up having to stay after class with his teacher and read Shakespeare? Yes, Shakespeare. Kind of ignore the synopsis. The synopsis of all his books don't really sound that compelling, but you just need to read them because they're so much better than what the synopsis tells you. Does that make sense? I find all his books so poignant. In every single Gary Schmidt book I've ever read, I've cried. I think in this book, the relationship that particularly stood out to me is the one between Holling Hood and his teacher, Mrs. Baker, and what he learns during these extracurricular moments, times with his teacher. I loved it. Possibly even better than the Wednesday Wars, though, was Okay for Now, which follows one of Holling Hood's friends, whose name is Doug Switek. In this book, Doug and his family have moved away, so it's a completely separate book. Holling Hood is only mentioned. This book, the synopsis, is also kind of hard to explain. My memory of reading this book is that it's about when Doug's family moves away and he finds himself in the library looking at these pictures of birds. They're famous. John James Audubon's Birds of America. Somehow that leads him to a friendship with another little kid named Lil Spicer. It's about their friendship. It's about Doug's family. He comes from an abusive family. His older brother is a bully. His father is a bully. This book, I remember having some scenes in it that were extremely difficult to read about. I would say that Gary Schmidt's books are definitely aimed towards older middle grade readers. We're talking about perhaps even middle school, just because the themes that it explores and some of the scenes that take place are much darker or more adult in nature than you'd find in a younger kid's book. They're still absolutely wonderful, and like I said, I've cried in every single one of Gary Schmidt's books I've ever read. Like I said, these are all books that I read as an adult, so many of my favorite middle grades that I read growing up, or even some of the classics that I've read as an adult, classic children's literature books that I love, I didn't mention. But I will save that for another video perhaps, because there's more to explore in children's literature. These are just some of the books that I absolutely have loved, that I think are totally worth reading as an adult, that will take you out of your adult life and put you into the shoes of children, but in a way that adults need. You will learn things from these books, your heart will swell because of these books, it will also ache and maybe weep a little bit because of these books, but they are always worth it. These are the kinds of books that C.S. Lewis meant when he was talking about children's literature and the value of children's literature. So I hope that you pick one of these books up, especially Wonder, since that's particularly timely right now, and I will talk to you all in my next video. Bye! I rarely script my videos, and whenever I get to the end of filming a video, I always feel like I should have spent more time coming up with exactly what I wanted to say. But my life forces me to be kind of spontaneous these days, and sometimes I just don't even have time. And also I don't want to sound like I'm a robot, and I'm afraid that if I scripted my videos, I just wouldn't sound authentic. And so I let myself say whatever I want to say, but I don't always know if what I end up saying is articulate, is what I really meant to say, or if it's complete. Like, are my thoughts complete? Did I say everything that I wanted to say about all of these books and about the value of children's literature? I don't know.